We'll go ahead and get started. This month's call, I wanted to kind of go over the three types of surfaces, or I guess pollutants would probably be the better term. The three types of pollutants that you could run into in this business. And again, I know this has been requested by several people as part of the training. So we'll pull this certified pro call out and actually put it inside of the technical training, because I think it'll be very beneficial, and I'd love to get anybody's feedback as well. Also, appreciate you guys, man, adding comments and stuff into the Google Classroom. I think it's helpful for everybody. And, you know, Amanda even pulled a little bit of that down and made its own document so that everybody can use, which I think is cool and pretty beneficial in the businesses to be able to do that. So I like having that mastermind alliance and the benefit of that. So we'll hop right into this. There's three main types of chemicals that you'll deal with in the exterior cleaning business. I've always broken these down into organic, inorganic, and ferrous. So breaking out the old chemistry books here on this stuff, but organic would be any type of living pollutant. So that's going to be your mold, your mildew, your algae, any type of substance that's a living organism would be considered organic material. Inorganic would be grease, oils, or any type of stains by like staining on decks, so like oil-based stains and things like that. Those are going to be inorganic. And then ferrous would be any types of metal or rust. So irrigation stains, you know, the iron that's inside of those pipes, or the runoffs from irrigation systems, as well as, you know, metal or battery acid as well. You know, when we did the Louisville soccer stadium, there were rust stains everywhere. Same thing for the Cincinnati soccer stadium. And they were actually from where the batteries drifted out of the lifts and the scissor lifts and the boom lifts onto the concrete. And it made rust stains. So when you have these, the only other thing that I'll put is in the inorganic, you could also include paint, like graffiti spray paint or any type of paint. It's not necessarily an inorganic because it would be more of a petroleum product. In that essence, with paint removal, I highly recommend Taganator. Adam, I know you've used some Taganator. Darren, have you ever used any of that in the past with graffiti?
I have. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. You know, it's kind of. I'm in the middle of two cities worth of graffiti, and you know, some of it worked good, some of it didn't. So
yeah, it really comes down to the type of paint that it is, and then also just how long it's there. Like I always tell the customers, like if you want us to get graffiti up, like you need to be calling us the day that you find it, because if you let that thing bake onto brick, you know, in 100-degree temperatures for 2 months and then try to come out and get it out, it's almost impossible. So Adam, how'd you do on that Wendy's? Was that pretty fresh graffiti? Did it come off pretty easy?
Oh, it came off super easy. It was in and out, real in and out. Didn't have to retreat it or anything. It came right off.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, and you know, the way that we price graffiti removal is hourly, and then we put a 2-hour minimum on it because of that, right? Sometimes it's going to take you 4 hours to get it clean, but sometimes if it's fresh, boom, you're in and out. So you got to make sure you have that minimum on there, so you're at least making a certain dollar amount. So then we'll go back to the top of this organics. You know, go ahead. What was that, Darren?
Oh, I just said I like that. I was going to ask you how, you know, it's kind of a bidding graffiti is kind of hard, you know?
Yeah.
Because
that's why, I mean,
it's in and out, sometimes it's not.
Yeah, and that's, you know, I don't really like to do hourly. You know, there's two sides to the hourly pricing. One, you never lose money because you're making a certain dollar amount per hour, so you've got a built-in profit margin. But sometimes you can shoot yourself in the foot because you leave a lot of money on the table. But in the sense of graffiti remover, you just never know what you're going to get into, any of those unknowns. And that's what I kind of like to default to that. If there's a huge unknown, if I have no idea how long this is going to take me, then, you know, you kind of can default to the hourly rate on that stuff there. So we'll go back up to the top. Organic, so mold, mildew, and algae, any type of living organism. Sodium hypochlorite is going to be your best solution for organic material. You know, there's a lot of different products out there. They try to say the the oxygenated bleach or that other stuff. Nothing beats sodium hypochlorite, which is bleach essentially. Typically, we try to use 12.5%. And again, with any of these chemicals, you want to make sure that you're using proper PPE and make sure you have eye protection, skin protection, rubber gloves, rubber boots if you're spraying it in concreted areas. I'll tell you guys a quick story. We were using some deck stripper, and I had a guy with a little, he had his girlfriend's hair tie on his wrist, and he got some splashed up on him. He rinsed his skin off, but the little hair tie was like a material that held the chemical in it. We got to driving back home, and there was a line that got cut into his wrist because it was compressed, and that chemical was on there. He had a chemical burn, and to this day, he still has a really bad scar. So, it's definitely any soaps, any chemicals, man. It's no joke. Cool. So sodium hypochlorite, typically in any of these, you're going to have some type of a surfactant. And so it's important to understand the difference between a chemical compound that can clean and a surfactant. A surfactant is simply used to aid in the cleaning process. Most of the time in our industry, it's used to create cling. So we want to create suds, which will also make it stick to the surface so that the chemical reaction can occur. So if you think about it, if there's algae growing on the side of a building and we spray bleach water up on there with no surfactant, it has a high viscosity, or maybe saying that backwards, maybe it's a low viscosity of like the friction on the surface. So what it means is if you just use bleach and water, you spray it up, it runs off the surface really quickly, and there's not a lot of cling, so it doesn't stick to that mold, mildew, and algae and let that chemical reaction occur. So by adding a surfactant into it, we like Eliminator, when it throw it up onto the building, it sticks, and it's going to come down the building slower. It's going to slow that down, which gives it a longer period of time of contact to have that chemical reaction. That's why when you see these guys like, oh, just use bleach, you don't need any soap or anything. Yes and no. I mean, yes, the sodium hypochlorite is what does the cleaning that kills the mold, mildew, and algae. But if you can have a surfactant, it's going to cling to the surface and clean more efficient. The other thing is with like, the soaps that we use, the surfactants that we use, like Eliminator, it has a rinse aid in it. And so that helps with the windows, leaving them a little better shape than just using straight bleach and water. Anything to add on the organics, guys?
Just a question. How much surfactant of the Eliminator are you putting in per gallon of SH you're using?
Yep. So we do 1 ounce per gallon of mix. So in the springtime, when the temperatures are a little lower, we'll do 60-40, 60% bleach, 40% water. As the temperatures warm up, you can go 50-50. And then maybe even sometimes if it's not really dirty, you can get away with 60% water, 40% sodium hypochlorite. And then, so if you have 100 gallons of mix that you're going to downstream out of, we found that 1 ounce per gallon gives you the kind of that perfect suds that you want, that perfect little mix. Now, I do know that some guys, when they're downstreaming, they've went to the dual barb downstream injectors. So they'll pull off the two and they'll mix like 50-50 bleach and water and pull into one side of the injector. And then they'll take some of like that marker soap, so like the hot pink stuff that you'll see or the bright blue stuff. You have to use a dual barb injector on that or a soft wash system, because if you batch mix, that bleach is obviously going to bleach the color out of the marker. So you can do that to market. I've just never really felt a need in that marker soap. I really think it's more flashy for the new guys. They're kind of like, oh, it's pink. I like spraying the stuff all over the building, but if you got a good surfactant, it's going to suds up. You're going to be able to tell where you sprayed it at. So that by kind of rule of thumb, it's 1%. And that's what Bob recommends. That's what's on the label. So that's what we use.
Nice.
Cool. Going into inorganic, so grease, oils, and stain. We obviously have developed our product, Rip It, which was kind of built to be this all-around product. We'll have the landing page finished on that one probably tomorrow. I think that it's going to really put a hurting on the industry when it comes to these degreasers and strippers. I was able to strip a solid stain deck by downstreaming this stuff. So we downstreamed it on, let it set, and then stripped a solid stain deck. Typically in the past, I've turned away solid stain decks because they're a pain in the butt to do. But this stuff did a great job. And that was at a downstreaming ratio. You could always bump it up, go 4-to-1 or 2-to-1 in a pump up sprayer and get a really strong mix. But the great thing is it doesn't ship hazmat. So there's not a huge cost on the shipping. So we loop all of that in, and it's like $90 for 5 gallons with shipping included. So, I would put it up there against F13 or Gutter Butter or any of those other kind of soaps for the inorganics. And it does a really, really great job. I really wanted it to be downstream because it kind of makes it dummy proof for technicians. When you get out on site and you start telling guys, hey, it's a 4-to-1 ratio or an 8-to-1 ratio. It's like, I had problem with fractions when I was in 5th grade. I know some grown people that still have problems with fractions. So when you're trying to get them to do ratios out on the job site, if you don't have a bucket that's marked on how to mix this stuff, it can get pretty tricky. And then you got guys mixing chemicals. I wanted something we could just screw the top off of, stick the hose in, and go to town. And so we've tested this with solid stain decks, grease and oils as well. So we've done windies with it. We'll just downstream it, straight on the concrete, let it set. We're able to clean even with cold water. It does a great job with that as well. So, that's going to be my recommendation for that. It's really an alternative to like a Purple Power or something like that. It's a lot more cost effective and a little stronger strength because it is a professional level cleaning solution. And it's got the surfactants built into it as well. So it is all in one.
Yeah. So you
any questions on the inorganics?
That would be like a good chemical for when I'm doing like real bad like tiger stripe gutters, I'm usually like brushing them. You think that would be a good product for it? Yeah, because I use a degreaser for it right now. Usually cut it like 4-to-1. It comes off real good.
Yep. And so it's made for that as well. Inorganic. So Tiger Stripes, that's a great recommendation there, Adam. Tiger Stripes is still inorganic staining. Essentially, the reason why you have to brush those gutters is because you're removing that layer of oxidation that stripe is behind. So the way they paint those gutters, they electrostatically paint them. That's why they get that chalky residue on there and they get those black stripes on there. If you do a regular house wash, you get the mold, mildew, and algae off, but then you've got those inorganic stripes still on the gutters. And you still gotta get a little brush on it. That's why, for the longest time when I was still in the field, I was like, oh, we don't offer that service. I don't know, I guess you'll have to paint your gutters or something because it's work, man. If you're gonna bid it, I was doing it $1 per linear foot per story. So, if I'm having to extend my water fed pole all the way up with a brush on the end of it, 3 stories, and get that elbow action going, it's like they're gonna be paying me $3 per linear foot on that stuff. So dollar per linear foot is where I'm at on that. And typically people have 300 feet of gutters. They're like, well, you charge me $387 for the whole house wash. You're gonna charge me another $300 just to scrub the gutters? I'm like, yes, absolutely, I am.
Yeah, I had a problem with that with a job I bid earlier this year. I was trying to describe, that I was brushing them, and that's why I was so much more expensive than these other bids that he was getting.
Yeah.
It was kind of hard to sell that visual, I guess, to him on why it's a more expensive service than just downstreaming it.
Yep.
But it's just something I learned. Something I learned is just really maybe give 2 different types of services for the exterior gutter cleaning.
Yep. That's why when we quote the house washes, Adam, that's a good point. For anybody that's watching the video on the replay as well, when you quote the house wash, it's important to say, look, on the house wash, we wash everything from the gutters to the ground, and it includes all mold, mildew, and algae and dirt. Now, there could be tiger striping, and that's why it's really good to make a blog post on the website, or I think there's even one on the EasyPro website. You can link to that one as well that talks about it. Typically what we try to do is we try to upsell the gutter brightening and the window cleaning on site, because it's very hard for them to kind of see that ahead of time. They're like, well, aren't you going to rinse the windows down? It's like, yeah, and they'll look good, but they're not going to be polished off, right? The gutters are going to look good. There's no mold, mildew, or algae on them, but they may have tiger stripes. The other thing that we always tell clients is that not all gutters have tiger stripes, right? So they're black. We could wash it. It could just be mold, mildew, and algae, and boom, they come back clean. So, I always tell them, hey, if you trust us and you want to work with us, let's go ahead and get the house wash on the schedule. And then, I'm not going anywhere. We can cross that bridge when it happens, to see if that's the option that we need to do. Because you're right. I mean, if you come in and say, here's your $400 house wash price, here's $300 for the windows, and another $300 for the tiger striping. And then, Bucket Bob and his cousin Tutu Tony come in and they give him a quote for $300 for the house wash, and they don't mention the other services. They're looking at you at $900 or $800 going, well, this is crazy. You're 4 times as high. I don't get it. I'm going with the Jeep guy. So you can lose some jobs on that.
I was at like 520 or something, and he said all the other bids were at like 300 something. And I was trying to explain that to him, like why I was different. But like you said, it's kind of hard. He probably doesn't know that it's going to look a lot better with the way I do it. It's kind of hard to like sell that image.
Yeah. And, and time is money, right? So like if you have time and you need the money, like follow up with that customer in a few weeks and say, hey, I wanted to offer to come by and take a look at your property and see how those gutters turned out. You can take a little bit with you in a brush and say, because you can rinse it down with the water hose and like, here, let me show you what I can do. Yeah. Give him a little bright spot and say, this was the difference here. You might be able to upsell him on that as well. So good stuff.
Yeah,
good stuff.
They would have been a pain. It would have been a pain to scrub those gutters too. That's why it was so expensive with it.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, listen, it's, it's kind of one of those things too, where sometimes you give a bid where it's like, I don't want the job. I almost want to scare the customer away, but you're polite enough to not say, I'm not interested. You just give them a high enough quote that they find somebody else and it's somebody else's problem. Right.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. And then lastly is Ferris. Oh, go ahead, Darren.
I got a question. What's your else? I got 2 actually, or a question and a statement. So what is your suggestion on like 3-story gutters, trying to get the gutter brightener onto those gutters to scrub them?
Yep.
You can't do a pump up,
Right. You can't get up there. I'll tell you, Patrick Clark had a really cool idea. So he uses his water fed pole and the hose for the water fed pole. And then he has like a half gallon a minute 12-volt system. And so then you basically use your water fed pole brush that has the jets in it. You obviously, it's one just for gutter cleaning. You're not going to use it on the windows after you use this, but, and then essentially you can put the pickup hose into your solution that you've, diluted down, and then click the on switch and then click the off switch. Right. And it'll pump it up to that 3rd story and kind of spray it out of that water fed pole brush through those jets that are on the inside of that. That I think has probably been the most intuitive design that I've seen, because by the time you get a 3rd story pole stretched out, you're trying to bring it down, dip it in a bucket, and then take it all the way back up. You got to run it down your elbows and stuff. It's bad. So that's probably the most intuitive thing that I've seen. Now, again, you don't want to use your 7 gallon a minute roof pump, right? That's just way too much solution up there. So go to like a Harbor Freight or a Tractor Supply, and then just pick up, a 1 gallon a minute or a half gallon a minute pump, because you don't need a ton of solution up there. You just need to get it a little bit wet. And, and the thing with gutters too is like you only move in a 10-foot, 15-foot section. Bob from Pressure Tech taught me that is like clean 10 feet, rinse it off, clean another 10 feet, rinse it off. Because if you guys haven't figured this out yet, if, Darren, Adam, you guys probably already have, but some of the new guys that are watching this video, if you try to do a whole stretch of gutter, by the time you come back to the beginning, it's dried back. That black streak like bonds back to the gutter again. And you're like rinsing it. You're like, why won't this come off? And I've even had it to where it's like the foam like sticks to it. The foam won't even come off now. So, do a 10 to 15 foot section, click your pump on to get it up to that 3-story, scrub it, click it off, and then, move it to the side, rinse it down, and just kind of move in 10-foot increments. But that to me has been what I've found. I've never used one, I've never built one, but I've seen Patrick do it. He uses it for a ton of apartment communities. And to me, it seems like that's probably your best bet.
I like that. So the next thing it was a statement. So actually I'm at a job right now. One of the team members of mine he's out washing right now, but a roll-up door on this hardware store. It was black, right? So, and I thought it was oxidation, pretty much. Use it's got those rubber flaps, so I thought it was rubber. So we used we did put some chlorine on it, and then we put some degreaser on it. We scrubbed it. It didn't work. But the first little spot, the first thing that was in that bucket or in our pump up was muriatic acid. It was in the hose, and it turned it white like that. And at first I was a little aggravated because I was like, hey, you can't be mixing these chemicals. You never know.
Yeah, that's a
what
bomb
might
waiting to happen.
right? Yes. I don't think this would have happened, with a bomb, but however, the chlorine was inside the muriatic acid was in that hose, and it turned those doors white pretty much with no, almost like spraying straight chlorine on a piece of wood. So
it was a white aluminum door then?
It is. I'll show you. I'll send a picture, or I can screen share it right now.
So it was a white aluminum door, and then it had black on it from like just oxidation, or what was?
I thought it was. You know how doors are at warehouses and things like that. So I don't know exactly what that was, to be honest with you, D. I don't know. The muriatic acid works, and the degreaser and the chlorine did not.
Wow.
And it was by fluke accident that this even happened. I would have never tried an acid on it. Why would I?
Metal surfaces, man, are so unique especially when you're talking about a metal surface with an inorganic compound. I'll tell you a quick funny story. When we were doing the Colts practice facility a few years back, they had black streaks that were kind of coming down on this white metal. And it wasn't, you could tell it was like powder coated metal or something, like it was bonded really strong. It wasn't secondary painted. And so, I threw the kitchen sink at this thing. We tried bleach. I tried, any degreaser that I could find. And I finally was like, you know what, I'm going to go to a local hardware store and see what I can come up with. We went through there and I was looking. I was grabbing all like Goo Gone and everything I could possibly think of. And what ended up working was wheel cleaner. So like and I can't remember for the life of me, I want to say it was some type of acid. It was like not a muriatic acid. It was like a
wheel brightener.
Yeah, it was like acetic acid or something like that. It was a wheel brightener. It was like an aluminum brightener, essentially. Man, we just squirted it on the bottle and it just wiped right off. And I'm like, I was hitting this thing with pressure and straight bleach and everything I had in the truck. And this little wheel brightener work. We ended up doing this 20,000 square foot building by just taking the lift up, starting at the top, hitting it with the squirt bottle and just wiping it off. We hand cleaned this 20,000 square foot building. But it was the only thing that I could find that works. And, that's just to speak to this business, man. There's been in this thing a long time, and there's always stuff that you find that you're like, what? I would have never thought that worked. But, when you're talking about inorganic materials, you've got that. It's a high pH, which is what Ripid is, like a degreaser. But then you can have a really low pH, which is what an acid is. And so depending on what that inorganic stain is, a high pH may not clean it, but a low pH may do the trick. And that's, sometimes you just got to kind of throw the kitchen sink at it and figure out, play a little chemistry, mad scientist with it to figure out what works. Cool. So then the last one on here is ferrous, which is metals and rust. And so that's where I'm bringing this part in, which kind of ties into this, which was an aluminum brightener. You can use, there's a couple of different products on the web. F9 works really, really well, but it's really expensive. The other option is Southside Equipment sells just aluminum brightener. Now it's expensive if you have to ship it. If you can find some aluminum brightener locally, it's going to be like a hydrochloric acid or a hydrofluoric acid. Again, really nasty stuff. But you can cut this stuff pretty thinly to still work. And you're going to be pennies on the dollar compared to an off-the-shelf product. Rust Remover Plus from powerwash.com, Michael Hindeleiter. It's another really good product. But, typically what we've found is aluminum brightener is going to be your cheapest option and work the best. Again, you want to make sure that you've got respirators and safety glasses and eye wash stations nearby, as well as rubber gloves and rubber boots. Because when you start messing with some of these stronger chemicals, it's no joke. This is real stuff. I think oftentimes, especially technicians are the worst, is like, oh man, it's just the pressure washing business. This isn't that big of a deal. And it's like, no, like you're dealing with 60% concentrated hydrochloric acid. Like the shit will burn a hole in your skin. Like it's no joke. And so for rust, or any type of ferrous, rust stains that could be on buildings or on sidewalks, battery acid or rust from like trucks that have been setting, you can come through with like an aluminum brightener and it'll just take it right up. We recommend surface cleaning first and then acid treating, because surface cleaner will get kind of the surface stuff off, and then anything that's gotten down into the concrete, you spray with the acid, let it set, and then rinse it off, and it normally changes right before your eyes, much like washing a house with bleach. So, and with the aluminum brighteners, with the acids, you don't really need any surfactant, because the chemical change is almost instantaneous when you're dealing with ferrous material. But back to Darren's point, using an acid on what looked like an oxidation removal situation. You tried the degreaser, which is the high pH. That didn't help. You go to a muriatic, which is a really low pH, and boom, all of a sudden it changes it. That's the thing to just really remember and drive home. If you're watching this, I want you to realize, like, there's really only 3 types of cleaning compounds. Like, you've got sodium hypochlorite, which is for organic material. If it's a living, breathing organism, mold, mildew, and algae, sodium hypochlorite is going to kill it and get rid of it. Then you come over to the other playing field for inorganics, which could be grease and grime, which needs a high pH, or it could be ferrous, which is a low pH. So you're either going to use a caustic or you're going to use an acid. And as Darren said, in the pump-up sprayers, make sure you keep these things labeled and separated, because if you take a pump-up sprayer that's had acid in it and you put sodium hypochlorite in it, bleach, and you put that thing under pressure, it will blow up. It will create what they call mustard gas, which is what they used in World War II. So like, it's some serious shit, and it's not to be taken lightly. What were you going to say, Darren?
On that note, I mixed aluminum brightener and a little bit of aluminum brightener and chlorine, and I had a bucket explode, and it sounded like a bomb in a neighborhood, and so many people started coming out of their house. Scared the shit out of me. The top lid of the 5-gallon bucket blew up and blew off. Actually, the ring, the part that hooks to the bucket, did not. The inner side of the bucket
blew the top of it off.
Blew off, and thankfully we weren't standing there, and there really was no. There was really nothing in the bottom of that bucket, to really mention anything to. Yeah. And I had the pour spout open, so it was. I mean, that's
just takes a little bit. I mean, think about like the Mentos thing, right? It only takes a couple of Mentos in a 2-liter to make that thing look like a rocket ship. And it's like, and we're dealing with things that we put inside of our body in that situation, like not counting acids and sodium hypochlorite. That's why I have this saying: when in doubt, rinse it out. When in doubt, rinse it out. That's like, that's a chemistry term. They taught me that when I was studying chemistry in high school with beakers and shakers. The chemistry teacher used to always say, when in doubt, rinse out. Oh, it looks like there's water down in there. Well, guess what? Acid looks like water as well. So when in doubt, rinse it out.
So the question I was going to ask is, when do you know to use an aluminum brightener than a muriatic acid?
They're essentially going to be the same, right? Because they're both acids. We're just talking about different chemical compounds. So a muriatic acid is essentially an acid, and aluminum brightener is an acid as well, but it's going to be a hydrochloric acid, I believe. Let me double check here. A little Google search.
So sometimes I didn't know if there was a particular time that aluminum brightener would work better than a muriatic, because I've always used muriatic, but I've also been dabbling a little bit into my aluminum brightener, and it, some days, it really depends on which one it is, but I thought maybe I could get some clarification of what would be. There's a rust stain coming out of this building right now. We put straight muriatic on it, didn't touch it. I didn't put any aluminum brightener on it yet. We really weren't going to mess with those things, but
yeah. So muriatic acid is hydrochloric, is typically what you see in that. So a hydrochloric acid would be considered muriatic, whereas like a Will brightener or something like that is going to be hydrofluoric acid. And hydrofluoric is nasty, nasty stuff. So quick little chemistry lesson, because again, if you guys don't know, I was going to be a chemical engineer. So this stuff is like in my wheelhouse. I love it. I nerd out when it comes to chemicals. I think that's why I love pressure washing so much. But hydrochloric acid will give you a chemical burn, but hydrofluoric, HF, is one of the most dangerous acids you can use, because if you get a drop on your skin, it won't instantly show up. What hydrofluoric does is it seeks out the calcium inside of your bones. So at North American Stainless, which is a stainless steel factory where I grew up, they use like 60 or 70% concentrated hydrofluoric acid. If you get that on your skin, they take you directly to the ER. They grid your skin off on a certain amount, like certain inches this way, certain inches this way. And then they will give you a shot of calcium glucate, it's a calcium shot. I want to say glutamate or something like that. And what they'll do is they will give you like 100 shots around where that acid hit you, because they need to get enough calcium in there so that it doesn't attack the bone in your skin, down in your body. Because what happens is when HF lands on your skin, it just doesn't create what they call surface burn. It will actually go through your muscle tissue down into your bone to go after what the calcium that's in your bones. Now that's like highly, highly concentrated. Typically, like I'm looking at like Carbright, right, which is a huge car supplier. The pH on this stuff is less than 1, so it's highly acidic. Fragrance is unscented and it's colorless, so that's what makes it super, super dangerous. And then they're saying that you could dilute this thing 4-to-1, let it dwell for 30 seconds, and then rinse it off. I just pulled up their PDF here. I was looking for, I don't see their MSDS sheet or SDS sheet, or there's a couple different names for them. Essentially, your data safety sheet will tell you what the concentration is. So anytime you're working with a soap or a cleaner, one, it's a DOT regulation. You have to have your MSDS sheet with you. And two, if you're dealing with chemicals, you want to have those MSDS sheets with you, because it tells you what to do in case of a fire or an accident or a spill, how to handle the first aid response to that. So very, very important to have an MDS with you, material data sheet on those situations. But again, that's going to be your difference, Darren, is a muriatic acid is going to be that hydrochloric, to where like a aluminum brightener will be at hydrofluoric acid.
I was mainly like, when would we use, like, what would be a better application for either one?
Yeah, hydrofluoric, so the aluminum brightener is going to be better for rust removal because, like you said, you put that muriatic on, didn't really do anything. The other thing is when you put muriatic on concrete, if it's too strong of a concentration, it can actually start eating the calcium in the concrete as well, and soften up that concrete so then you could etch it. That's why, when you're using acids, or really when you're using any type of chemical compound, you want to start with a diluted solution and then work your way up. So dilute the solution and then add more as you need it. Try a test spot. Didn't do it. Okay, let's strengthen the solution a little bit. Try another test spot. Strengthen it up a little bit. And muriatic acid is not going to remove rust, though. That's more. I don't ever really use muriatic because I want to keep one acid on hand. And typically, what aluminum brightener will clean, it's going to clean everything that muriatic would, plus some things that it wouldn't. So that's why I like to just keep aluminum brightener on hand, and you can dilute it down pretty. I mean, the stuff we get from Southside, I think we dilute it like 10-to-1 in a pump up sprayer, and it takes rust stains up pretty easy. The other thing with rust is sometimes you have to do multiple applications, right? So you might need to put an application down, let it dry, put another application down, let it dry, to just continue to pull that rust up out of the concrete, since it's a porous material.
Okay.
Cool. Any other questions on any of that, fellas?
Yeah, I have one question about something that I don't think you've gone over. what would be the best thing to use for like clay or like mud stains that are like kind of, say it's like a new construction build and there's like mud like caked up like 2 feet on the walls right there. I've had some jobs like that before, and it seems like the stuff comes back pretty easily, or it just leaves that little tent of mud there. I was just wondering what would be the best thing to use for that.
So the best one for that I found is oxalic acid. So OXALIC, I believe, oxalic. And it's a super friendly acid. It's going to come like in a powder form. You can get that from Pressure Tech as well. I think they call it F10. It's like ox. It's got a picture of an ox on it. And so that's a great acid for removing light rust stains. So it'll remove like light, like foundational rust stains. It'll remove rust stains as well as like those red clay stains that they may have. You're just going to mix that up, like an 8-ounce scoop in a 5-gallon bucket of water. Mix it up with your brush. Just lightly brush it on with a soft bristled brush. Just get it on there, and you'll see it. It'll just lighten it right up, and you can rinse it right off.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and that'll work for if you've got rust on vinyl siding, because vinyl's not a porous material, oxalic acid could work on that as well for rust stain. It's also really good for actually one of my most viewed, believe it or not, one of the most viewed videos on the EasyPro channel is me doing a review. I had a scum line on my boat from it being in the river for a couple of weeks. And so like my white fiberglass had like turned like green. And so I just brushed it with that oxalic acid, and it brightened the hull, cleaned it right up. It took all that scum line off and made it white again. So that's a solid one to have in your arsenal as well. That was a good question, Adam, because I also recommend that for when you're neutralizing a deck. So if you strip a deck, so if the deck is stained, you're going to come in, use a product like Rip It, downstream it, let it set. That's going to solidify the stain, make it soft and lift from the surface. You'll pressure wash the deck, but it's still going to have this dark color because the pH is jacked up, right? Because we've raised the pH of the wood. So what we need to do is balance it back out. You'll take some oxalic acid, mix it up in a 5-gallon bucket, just downstream it, coat the deck down and leave it, and you'll just see it. It'll just brighten up. It'll turn a real nice bright color. And that's when you know that the wood's been neutralized. And then that lets the homeowner or you as the contractor come back and stain the deck, and it's good to go now because it's had the pH has been neutralized. So the stain's going to adhere to it really nicely.
Sweet. Yeah, some good information right there.
Good question, man. Good question.
Yep.
Yeah. Cool, guys. Anything else? This is good. Sorry, a 40-minute chemistry class today, but I know I wanted, a lot of people have asked me, they're like, hey, is there chemical training in the course? And I've had to tell them no for months, but now I want to take this one and put this in. I think it gives everybody a good breakdown of the differences in chemicals and the differences in surfaces and stains or contaminants that you would run into, and what's best to use on best surface.
I think it was a great day on this stuff. It's and I'm glad I'm not the only one out there that's struggling on getting stains and just as you said, throw in the kitchen sink. I mean, I wouldn't believe how many times I went and spent $100 at, wherever, Walmart, grocery store or somewhere, hardware store, trying to find that particular thing. And it, it worked or didn't work. And, sometimes I just walk away and I spent 4 hours and $300 on stuff. And sometimes I had to go and buy a 5-gallon bucket of something and it didn't touch it. And it was like, that was a waste of money,
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's one of the challenging parts about this business is the variables that are involved in it. But, sodium hypochlorite, which is bleach, Rip It or any type of degreaser. And then if you can have an aluminum brightener and then an oxalic acid, those 4 chemical compounds will pretty much take care of anything that you run into. And then, last but not least, don't be afraid to walk away from a job. I think there's a lot of guys that don't know how to turn stuff down, and it's tough. I get it. Like when you're just starting out or if you're in a dry spell in the business. But sometimes, man, it's, you can get your ass handed to you on some of these projects if you're not careful.
I do know Ray Burke said he did the same thing. He's spent hours upon hours sometimes trying to get something clean that's as clean as it was getting. you know.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, so
Cool. All right, guys. Anything else before we go?
I think that's it.
Awesome, man. Good class today, guys. Good hanging out with you all, and hope you guys' season are off to a good start. We'll talk next month.
All right.
Sounds great. I sent you those pictures of that door.
Okay, cool. I'll take a look at them. I'll post them up in the group too.
Perfect. Awesome.
All right, see you guys.
See ya.
See you.